Just two conscious guys talking, where conscious male leaders come together and have a discussion that is deep, that is nourishing, that allows us to see the illumination of consciousness that's unfolding progressively for men that are waking up in the world, and where you can get insights on your own awakening as a man, and also for amazing women that want to learn more about men's challenges and struggles that have created some of the dysfunction we've seen within men in its society, often called, quote unquote, the patriarchy and other terms. What created it? What is the genesis of it all? What can we do about it today to empower men to be all that they're meant to be and to support the awakening of consciousness for men and women and all? Scott, it's great to be with you again. It's not been that long we've known each other, but just so grateful to talk to you recently, to get to know you, got introduced to you, and started watching some of the reels and video or whatever I saw online, and you're talking about emotional, intelligence, things like that, or along those lines. And I don't remember all precisely what you've said in those things, but all I remember is like, wow, that's something that doesn't get cultivated very, very much, especially in men. So I'm like, wow, this is really remarkable. And then the conversation we had recently was great, just learning more about you and about your background and all the cool stuff that you've been up to. So it's just grateful to be with you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to, be with another man who is doing work for himself and other people. And I'm excited to talk and connect and see what emerges.
Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, this so subject, like a big thing that I've seen with the men that I have talked to is pretty much universally they say one thing again and again. I just couldn't really be vulnerable. I couldn't really
Mm,
just share my emotions. No crying, all that sorts of things. That sort of theme is run, and the number one thing is stated again and again and again and again.
mm,
And without me necessarily, like in this case, after doing quite a few of them now, 20 plus, now I'm even just leading with that idea. Like that's a big component of it. Men deal with. But I don't want to, steal your thunder, so to speak, of what you feel like some of the stereotypes you run into. But what are some of the ones you run into? Was that one of them? And what are some of the other like male stereotypes that you kind of encountered, growing up, and how that impacted you, and how you were able to sort of move through those?
yeah, I think, there's a cultural wound and there's cultural baggage with the boxed in definition we have of strength and how men have to hold that as the provider, as the person who's supposed to hold for the partnership in difficulty. And we take strength as not feeling or expressing emotion. Like if you feel or express emotion, you're weak. And so as children, it seems to be the case that if we had emotions, if we felt sad, if we felt angry, if we felt disappointed, we came to internalize and learn that that wasn't okay. And that wasn't the definition of it. Was subtle. It's not like our parents explicitly said your sadness is okay, but it was like, hey, cheer up, or hey, put some dirt on it, or get over it already. It's not a big deal. And so we came to learn that the expression of our emotions from the people where we needed to get the most unconditional love from, we actually wouldn't be returned in receiving love. And so there was sort of this contract on our lovability of the full expression of who you are. If you express that, you're not loved.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. So true. So yeah, that is so true. Is just I always say, like, I think, where do you think it comes from? I have my own theories of where this whole idea, you got to be strong, you can't fully express yourself. Like, I know as a kid, like I had that I was shy, but I had an impulse to want to be really like very enthusiastic and very like when I saw other people like looking at me kind of weird, even though I was a kid, like a little weird. Like I was like, oh, okay, like I guess that's too much, and
Mm.
this idea you can't show your emotions for sure, right? If you start sharing all these deep emotions and everything with everybody, people are like, I think one of the common reactions I got whenever I would do that would be like people blow me off, or they would be like, wow, hey, lighten up, dude. Like it'd be like that sort of thing. So where do you think that comes from? This whole thing of, toughen up, let's not go into the depth of what you're
Mhm.
feeling and your expression. Where do you think it comes from?
So, just in the case of other people not being comfortable with your emotional expression, it's the case that if we're not comfortable with sadness, anger, fear, grief in ourselves, then seeing in other people we're not comfortable with. So we have to tell them to lighten up or, hey, what do you need to fix that? Because it's first a reflection of, oh, if they feel sad, how would I have to feel? And if I'm not comfortable with sadness in myself, then I'm not okay with them being sad. So on
Mhm.
just a one-to-one individual level, it's usually we try and change people's emotional experience or modify them when we're not comfortable feeling those things ourselves.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so true. Uh, yeah, it's threatening, right? Like, well, where are you going? I don't want to go there. Like, lighten up, man. Like,
Yeah, and and this comes from the really good thinker and coach, but Joe Hudson says like what we're avoiding the emotional experience is actually what we create and intensify. So my own, example of working with a client recently of he didn't want to tell somebody in a relationship that he just didn't feel love anymore because he didn't want her to feel hurt, so he wouldn't have to feel hurt. And by avoiding the hurt, what does that create? He doesn't tell the partner, and long term it just creates more hurt. So the emotion we're avoiding and that we can't feel in ourselves, we actually create more of. Yeah,
right.
I think this comes from really the mythology and the value systems of modernity, which if you look at most of the men we celebrate, it's these macho men who've had these incredible external achievements as sports players, as musicians, as actors. And we look at sort of the external picture of it's this much money, these cars, this women, and celebrities are celebrated. Um, but we don't really know about their internal world. We just see like the perfect picture of the game-winning shot, and we say, oh, that's our picture and idea of success without knowing at all what's underneath the hood. And so we're trying to emulate this external story of what we've valued as our virtues without actually knowing what someone's home life is like.
Oh, that's so true. I think about again, and I don't know the full picture of this person's life either way at all. But who does know? I mean, even if you knew him personally, maybe you don't fully really know even then. But
Mhm.
I look at someone like a football player that just quote unquote retired. Who knows with these guys these days? But
Mm.
Tom Brady,
Mhm.
retiring, and it just seems like he was so obsessed by being the best, in football or whatever it is, a quarterback and win these championships that,
Mhm.
yeah, it was great for that, this obsession, but it seems as though, I don't know the ins and outs. It doesn't look like it necessarily was good for people around him, maybe, or I'm
Mhm.
just speculating halfway, but it looks that way. There was a divorce, it looks like, and everything. So, things not maybe working out in other aspects of life and we're that focused. And so a lot of people look at and go on, who's the GOAT? Who's the GOAT? Always in spurts, right? They're constantly, there's endless videos, and I'm a sucker for it too myself. Like I'll be like,
Mhm.
yeah, let's look at another Michael Jordan's the GOAT video. Why
Yeah,
not? And it's like it's insane. There's no reason to look at another video of it, but it's so wired in our psyche that yeah,
totally.
I'm the strongest, I'm the fastest, I'm the whatever, that becomes like the thing we send a focus on so much rather than, oh, they're the most loving, they're the most kind, they're the most, we don't focus on that so much, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know, like, right? I mean, that's what I've noticed.
Yeah, it's funny. I was having a conversation about this the other day, and somebody asked, what's the fear of being ordinary? And so my understanding of it is that greatness is a biological impulse. What the impulse is to expand our abilities, to expand our competencies, so we can become relentlessly and everlasting secure, expanding our identity until we help more things get secure. And that's the direction of the arrow of evolution. And so this impulse towards greatness is doing something that's uniquely yours to do and creating beauty that's uniquely yours too, that gives an aliveness. And when we're lacking that, there's nothing that can really make up for it. And so the fear of being ordinary is really this like, oh my God, I'm missing this deep-hearted evolutionary impulse to expand myself. And what is one of the easiest sort of things to do is obsess of where the goat is or where other greatness is. So, and as a culture, we're deeply missing people being in their own and growing their own competencies and gifts and finding security from like uniquely doing the things that they were radically and uniquely put here to do. And so it's really easy to obsess over like, oh, look at Tom Brady. And what's that like? Like, while just assuming the external experiences automatically lead to internal events.
Mm-hmm. Elaborate on that for us. Yeah.
What we like, when you actually ask somebody what they want, they might say it's the cars and the money and to be the greatest quarterback ever. But what they actually probably want is to feel seen and heard, to feel fully nourished and related, to feel competency, to feel meaning. And so if you to sort of bring someone into this, like, no, I think I'd still want the money and the cars. And you'd go, okay, well, what if you had none of it? And you didn't have the money, you weren't the greatest quarterback, but you felt just blissful and joy, and you felt a lot of connection with the people around you, and you had 5 best friends who always answered, your phone calls, and you had really deep conversation, you felt understood, you felt you were growing. Like, would you still want that? And then you can paint it the other way of like, what if you were top quarterback, but you just felt perpetually depressed, disconnected, you had no one to turn to, you felt isolated? Like, so what we're doing is we're assuming that certain external experiences lead to internal experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're actually after is the internal experience of satiation.
Mm-hmm.
And by taking the cultural value system of what we've identified as the most successful, the highest order of life, we're like, oh, that thing is what will get me the experience, without realizing it's actually an internal experience we're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And this actually, I don't know how deep you want me to go here, but this actually, I think, cycles really back really deeply into why we don't feel emotions. I think as a culture, we're lacking the nourishment of what our genes need to feel secure. And when you lack nourishment, like, the adaptive signal is to feel a bunch of unpleasant emotions. Unpleasant emotions are behavioral tools to incentivize you to find security. And so living in long-term lack of nourishment, lacking autonomy and competency and relatedness, our emotions are scary, because if we don't solve those things, they indicate to us, oh, something is unsafe. I don't feel safe in the world. And it's been a compensation mechanism of culture of like, don't worry, don't feel those things. That's not what a strong man does. Just go and find things outside you that give quick fixes and validation, and hacks actually the dopaminergic pathway.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think if you ask someone like Tom Brady, you're going to be depressed, you're going to feel horrible inside. Do you still want it? Someone like him is probably going to say, yes, I still want it. There are some people, literally, like you got the Goggins, right? The David Goggins. You guys got to be a beast and stay hard forever. And we all know, he even would tell you, it all comes from him feeling like, because he says a piece of shit as a kid, and we're growing up or whatever. I was a piece of shit. I'm not going to be that piece of shit. I'm never going to be that piece of shit again, right? So like he's overcorrecting for the rest of his life. Like, callous this mind. I'm going to be stronger and persevere through anything, because it's the mental strength. That's all that matters. Mental strength is what matters. That's why I do all these physical things. It's mental strength. And so he swears by it, and you can't talk him out of it, right? You never talk him out. Now, I think most people, you're right. If you presented it to them in that way, like I have to people, I have grown men cry on the stage, realizing they don't want what they want, when they realize like they just want more of the quality of the feeling that they're looking for, they would get through acquiring those things. I think most people, you're right. They would be like, oh yeah, you're right. Like that's not, first and foremost, really what I want. I want the feeling. Yeah, I love those other things maybe, but more so I want those feelings. I think most people can relate to that. But
Yeah.
there are certain people out there, they don't care. They're like, that's just the sacrifice I'm making. I want
Hmm.
that no matter what. And
Yeah.
in a way, it's kind of cool, but I think it's not cool for the people that that's not what they really want, right?
Hmm.
They don't really want that, but they're being brainwashed into thinking that's what's valued. That's what you should supposed to want. I
Yeah.
think that's more the problem, in my opinion, like more of the dilemma.
Yeah. And, people's feedback mechanisms are what feels good. And it's a tough place to tell people how authentic their good feelings are, right? And what they want, because you can't want anything for anybody else. And I think it's really important to add a little nuance here. I do think that there is a masculine archetype and characteristic and expression, which is strong, which deals with challenges, which is direct, which is confident, which is a leader, which is a protector. And then so, maybe someone listening is like, okay, but how does that fit with feeling your emotions? My sense of it is when you feel your emotions, when you the strength, the confidence, the ability to be in battle to protect comes from as a result of feeling and going through the scary shit authentically, not by avoiding it and saying, I'm going to be strong anyways to bypass things that feel scary. You get the natural result is resilient strength. Like when you embrace the scary emotions, you're not really scared. Like if you can deal with a bunch of fear, a bunch of anger and sadness, then what are you actually scared of? Like, if you've died in yourself and died before the battle through everything you've done and felt vulnerability and felt okay not being loved and felt okay being rejected, and you're not scared to be sad, then what are you actually scared of outside of you? And so that's where the authentic idea of the masculine comes in of, yeah, it is mental strength. Yeah, it is commitment. Yeah, it is drive. But that comes from a healthy emotional fitness, a healthy emotional body, where I always say the mind tells the story that the body lives. And so like when you're sad, how does your mind feel? It doesn't feel great. When everything's clicking, what are the stories of your mind? And so a lot of people are, and this is a big thing in modernity and it goes really deep, but a lot of people try and take their minds as like a CEO to force their bodies to feel a certain way. And to me, that's the wrong way of causality. So if you can work in the body and the emotions, the mind naturally follows. And so what happens for the masculine archetype is, just repeating what I'm saying, is by feeling the scary stuff and not being scared to embrace intensity, you get the authentic strength that's, hey, I can go feel scary shit. It's not that things don't feel fearful. It's I'm not fearful of fear.
Hmm. Hmm. Right, right. Yeah, yeah, it's a good way to put it too. Like to be willing. Yeah, there are definitely many men that don't want to feel the feeling of fear and are going to try to avoid that, right, at any cost, basically. So I know that, yeah, my own sense of vulnerability, I think I have covered up many times. And I do the overcompensation too sometimes, and it's automatic. It's like,
Mhm.
so for example, if you put, I'll just use more of a theoretical and maybe I'll use a real one later, but like if I do theoretical, you put me in the gym next to guys, bench pressing like double the weight I can or something like that. Okay, let's just say something like that. And they're like, yeah, you're a piece of crap, man. Man, we're way stronger. I know what's gonna say that probably for the most part, but let's say they're all like all of them, all 50 of them that can all bench press double what I can. I'm going to bench press over 400 pounds or whatever it is, the double it might be. I'm going to bench press that right now, like, or it's going to kill me or I'll be in such a zone that'll just happen because I literally just have a crazy program inside me that just
Mhm.
says, no, you cannot put that shit on me and it's not going to stick. Here, this is all a bunch of games, triple the weight. I don't care. It's going
Mhm.
up. Like
Yeah.
that's where a part of my psyche will go to. It
Mhm.
would go there.
Yeah.
And now that's more like kind of extreme, like, but also can just show up more subtly, like well, this person did this feat or that feat or whatever, and I'm just confidently just say, yeah, I could do that too, no problem.
Yeah,
Yeah, just things like that. It's interesting. Like it's already in my wiring, and I think a lot of it comes from some of it's natural competence, maybe, but like some of it also, I think, comes from just like this overcompensation. I don't want to ever feel weak or like I couldn't do something or anything like that. I think definitely, I just speaking for myself, I think some of it definitely comes from that.
And so, the first question is, so to compensate and overcorrect, we try and bench for 100 pounds and we can't. So in not trying to feel weak, what happens?
Well, I haven't literally experienced that yet.
Yeah, I'm just hypothetically to somebody, who's like, oh, I can't feel weak. So instead of taking, you know, allowing myself to admit that I'm taking this personally, to avoid feeling weak, I'm going to try and put more
Right.
literal plate on the bar and I won't be able to do it. And so the feeling
Right.
that I'm avoiding, I'm actually attracting of weakness. And I'm wondering, like, how
I
much could
throw
be
That's
could be
good.
avoided?
Let's go there. But let
Yeah.
me say first, just to answer your question, I have been in those situations. And like one guy had whatever weight on the machine. I'm like, get off that. Because mad. This is a mad move. I like, get off there. Are you done yet? Whatever. I actually not only lifted the weight, but I broke the machine. I'm just
Hmm.
saying there's a beast that lives inside some of us that gets unleashed. And it's insane what it can do,
Mm,
for not good or bad. But I'm just saying, like, it's insane what it can do. And I have been in a situation where I'm saying I could do that and then I couldn't do it. And then there is that flip side of like, so it's not great either way, really, because if I actually actualize it, it puffs up my sense of like, see, I could, that's
mhm,
not so great either, really, in a way. And then if it goes the other way where, oh, I couldn't do it, then I'm like, yeah, some part of my conscious thing, yeah, you see, you are kind of a piece of shit or whatever. I don't know, like you're
mhm.
weak or whatever, or whatever story it's going to say. I don't know the precise words in this moment, but like, yeah, I definitely been there in other ways where I'm like, I'm losing at something. Someone's clearly just better at the thing, like something like
Mhm.
just even tossing bags with like somebody not that long. I'm like, I'm beating you no matter what. Let's be but I couldn't do it. He's just better. He's just better.
Mhm.
It just could not do it to save my life almost that
Mhm.
day. And he's like, it's just bags. What are you getting all crazy about? But he's a little bit of a bigger guy and everything. Like, so they see, then all of a sudden I'm tweaked. I'm like, oh, I'll show you. Like, and
Yeah.
and I realize it's insanity, but that's sometimes, I'm not saying every case, but sometimes that's where my psyche goes. For me, as a guy, and it happens
Mhm.
sometimes. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and you know, you get to also ask, which I'm sure you've been through the process of like, how much of this is mine,
Mm.
right? Of how much of this is really authentic to what I care about, and how much really is a cultural implant that says this is how you get loved.
Mm.
And there's real strength in when something says something offending. I know this bench press um, scenario is hypothetical, but when we allow ourselves, rather than retaliation to avoid the hurt and just being like, ouch, that hurt. And like, wow, what kind of strength does that take to admit, like, ah,
Yeah.
yeah, that hurt, and to not direct our pain at somebody else or to not overcompensate. It's not to say that anger is wrong. Anger is really this beautiful emotion that says something I cared about got violated.
Hmm.
Um, and it's how can we find a home to express that anger without putting ourselves at risk or directing it and putting it on to others.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And so
Right.
anger could be a great fuel to better yourself. But the question is, are you bettering yourselves in the virtues and the avenues that you want to? Like, what's yours to better yourself in?
Hmm. Yeah, because I mean, in that scenario afterwards, I found other things to attack about him in subtle, more subtle kind of ways. Oh, I'll find his weakness here or there, right?
Mhm.
And so that's what guys do. It happens all the time. I'm not the exception. We fall into that trap at times. And yeah, I've definitely been super vulnerable with men and all the rest. And like, yeah, dude, you're just better at this than me. And on another thing with the same person, I'm like, yeah, geez, I'm going to
Mhm.
beat you. I'm going to do it. Wow, you're really good though. You're really good at that. Like, at
Yeah.
the same time. So, But yeah, it's a wild, it can be a really wild ride for us. Yeah, so it's interesting. That's a good question. Like, how much of that? I know my dad. Say, I think I took it on for my dad in part. Like, he was bullied and stuff, and I experienced some of it. It sounds like it was way worse for him. And so he had stories about how he kicked all their butts or whatever. Like, there was 8 of them and all this stuff, right? And we don't know if it was true really, because we've caught him at times like making up stories. So we don't even know if they were true. And but my point is, like, it was this idea of this, yeah, overcompensation. We could rise
Hmm.
to the occasion. But yeah, it's all over our in our movies, right? It's always
Hmm.
like, oh, this person was picked on or couldn't make it or weren't good. So they all said you could never make it. It's like a thing in our culture. Hey, I told you you couldn't do it. Then you rise up, you show them you can do it. You can do it. You're
Hmm.
better than all the rest of them, and you overcome. And we celebrate these stories all the time. Every one of us do. Scott, I'm sure you have.
Hmm.
Maybe you don't as much
Sure.
lately, but we all do it. And so it's very seductive. It's very alluring. And there's maybe some virtue in it, but there's a lot of downside going down that route in a particular way, right? Like,
Hmm.
just I did it out of my wound if I didn't feel good enough. I think so. Anyway, what is the impact? Like, we just listen. How did that negatively impact you? Yes, maybe there was a positive, but you got to the other side, you ended up feeling empty, you felt worse than ever, you became
Hmm.
suicidal. That has happened to people that go down the
Hmm.
route. So
Hmm.
it's a really yeah, it's a very interesting dynamic.
Yeah, and at least as of late, um, if I'm noticing a sort of stick in my psychological landscape where like my mental narratives are caught and they're ruminating to a certain tone, it's kind of
Mm,
like the experience of like when you're in a car and God damn, the person to the left and the person to the front's going too slow and the traffic light didn't turn at the right time. And you're like, oh, the traffic light's not even animate. So clearly the anger isn't in the traffic light, it's in me. And
yeah.
so it's when I notice I'm stuck there, and whether it's someone at the gym or not, it's a really quick signal for me of like my flashing lights go off, like, great, an emotion's present in me right now. And when I take radical ownership in that moment of like, I'm the person experiencing this, I'm the person feeling this, it's inside me, then I get to dialogue with and intelligently listen to the emotion of, oh, how do you want to express yourself? How do you want to move from me? And sometimes with anger, like, yeah, I want to pick up the big tire and throw it down. Sometimes I want to shadow box. Sometimes I want to yell. And then there's this not only lightness and clarity and ease that comes when the emotions move, because emotions are highly temporary. They're ephemeral. They're not supposed to stay. When they get stuck, they become our identities, but they're
Mm,
not supposed to get stuck. They're like, I say they're like clothes we take off and we change.
mhm.
It's like we've been wearing the same clothes for years. And when they move, what also happens is our relationships become much cleaner because you realize, oh, that anger moved. Oh, I'm not actually mad at you, Jim Bro. And I can now see you cleaner and clearer in the present because the anger of the past is no longer getting in the way and has moved. And
Mhm.
yeah, I thought of an interesting question that's more personal for you. And maybe we can go there another time. That's up to you.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
We're talking here. We can go there. I also want to circle back to some of
Hmm.
the things you experienced, in your own journey. But yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, ask.
Yeah, when it was interesting to hear about how your dad was bullied and his sort of triumphant story was like, oh, I stuck it to the bullies.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm curious of like how much of like the need to outwork or the anger, or like the guy at the gym is like, oh, this is how I internalized when I was young. Like when people, like this is how we're supposed to handle people who seem more physically stronger to be loved and to be okay.
Right. Yeah, totally. Because he was very slight. He was very thin at that point, and then he put on weight, of course, because he wanted to be bigger. So he went
Mhm.
around being overweight, as an adult ultimately, and so to yeah. So I think that yeah, it's like, okay, we can't allow these guys that seem bigger and stronger. to bully us
Yeah.
in any way,
Yeah.
like even because I've run into it in different ways. I lived with a guy who was like
Hmm.
sort of a beast. He's like,
Hmm.
strong guy, working out all the time every day and with the
Hmm.
big weights and everything. And he said, I'm living with a bunch of nerds, me and other guys that were in the same, apartment. And some of the things he was doing, I forget. I just things that were annoying. And I was like, I'm gonna kill him. I'm gonna kill him. That's
Hmm.
what I'll do. I was busy training. I was doing my own training. I was like, it's crazy. I was like doing
Hmm.
martial arts I had learned in my room and making really loud noises that he could hear too. I was
Hmm.
like, I'm ready, getting ready. I'm gonna kick your
Yeah.
butt. And
And
never happened. Nothing happened so
it's
much that I felt like I needed to confront him or anything. But I was like in preparation mode. It was crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool to see all the ways we re-attract the same energetic circumstances so we can feel that we've learned the lesson, and
Mm-hmm.
like how our unconscious wounds continually attract those so we can learn the emotional lesson. Yeah, the question came up too that I was curious of, like, if your dad felt most secure and like felt like he authentically handled the bullies, like what do you think he would have wanted you to know at that age for how he handled the bullies and what that meant? Like, what do you think he would have said to you?
Hmm, that's interesting because we've never talked about stuff,
Hmm.
like that. We talk about sports or usual things mostly.
Hmm.
What would he have wanted me to know about that?
From the place of him of like feeling secure and like he really was like to the
Mm,
boys, ouch, that hurt, and this is my boundary, man, so don't touch me. And
mhm,
like if he stepped into that place himself, what do you think he would have wanted to impart to you at that young age?
mhm. Not really sure. I mean, I talk to my dad every day, briefly, usually every single day. I could ask him what he would say now, but I don't really know. I don't have a clear answer if I'm being honest.
What would, if you were then your own parent, then what have you
Okay.
wanted you to know? You
Oh,
know?
okay, if I had my own son, which I don't have one, but like, what would I say? Um, I probably first would be like, okay, just be really clear energetically, like, hey, like
Hmm.
you kind of what you just said, like just be really clear, like, hey, don't do that, be done.
Hmm.
Just be clear. Don't get riled up. Just say, hey, stop it. Just be,
Hmm.
real clear with people. I'd be tempted to say, if they take it too far, you just kill them. Not literally kill them, but
Hmm.
you know what I mean. Just let them have it. I'd probably be tempted. I don't know if I would say that or not, but because it's all hypothetical. But I'd say, yeah, just to be firm. Probably if it's at school, yeah, talk to the teachers. Things like that. Defend yourself. Don't allow yourself to be totally run over at all, but you probably won't happen if you're just strong in your own energy, you're
Hmm.
strong in your no.
Yeah.
Chances are, because people get bullied, it's because they sense a vulnerability in you. It's like,
Yeah.
it messed with you, yeah.
And so
And
what
you
would you
strengthen
tell
it
him
up, they
about,
find easier targets, right? Like people that
yeah,
seem like more open to it, yeah.
what would you tell him about strength? Like what if you
Yeah.
were talking to him again and you were the parent he needed to be at that moment, what would you tell him
Mhm.
about strength? Like what would you want him to know?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I'd probably say Uh, wow, there's a lot of different aspects of that. But in regards to this is, well, I mean, the other aspect that I totally would be talking about is, these bullies are probably bullied. They're probably being
Hmm.
bullied themselves at home or somewhere in some way. They're probably being bullied. They just are insecure. It's not, so it's not don't take it so personally. That's what I've had to tell myself about, one of my
Hmm.
primary bullies as a kid. I'm like, I know this guy has dealt with a lot of abuse. I know
Hmm.
it, right? So that's one of the things where it helps to soften it because I can have at least more compassion about whatever happened and be like,
Hmm.
well, I understand like where it comes from, I
Hmm.
understand this is a wound going on. It's probably again all part of the drivers of why I'm doing this series and this sort of stuff is like we need to address these issues so that these cycles don't keep coming. As
Mhm.
that'd be the other thing I would talk about is, listen, probably they're struggling and that's why they're doing that. But if you're in your own strength and you're coming from real strength within, which I would hope that I would have cultivated in that young boy,
Mhm.
and there's less of a chance, at least, of those things coming your way.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And what I notice with most of the men I work with is these cycles are ancient.
Mm.
They
Mhm.
really birth and emerge in our childhood where everyone's so quick to say, I had a really loving dad. It's not about that. I'm like, yeah, you can have a loving dad. That's great. And and then there's always an and. They're like, I scored 6 goals. And he was like, why didn't you score 8? And but he was loving.
Mm.
And so like there's this like deep desire to protect. And like the truth is they can be very loving and nurturing the best way they know how. And when we're young, we really internalize things. We're hypersensitive, trying to make meaning of the world and see how we fit in. And without knowing it, we carry these wounds and complexes of like, oh, here's how I have to compensate with that situation. Or here's what I can't feel because if I feel that, that means I'm not safe. And
Mm.
we recruit these situations over and over and over. It's the hypothetical strong roommate
Mm.
over and over and over again in our life. And that's really where the repeated blocks of these emotional dissatisfactions come up because it's actually, we're unconsciously recruiting them because we're attracting the trauma, not because we want to live the trauma, because we want to learn the lesson. We want
Mm.
to teach our body what it means to feel safe in those situations, but
Yeah.
without making the patterns of childhood conscious. And then also doing the important, messy, beautiful work of unburdening the stuck emotions that happen in childhood, it's very hard to break that cycle. And so the deeper the work can go into where does the pain emerge from, and the more you can embody and release, the more, the strong roommate comes in. You're just like, as you were speaking to me, oh man, you're just doing your thing. And, that's what you need. And I feel a lot of love for just what you need right now, but it doesn't perturb me because it's not hitting, the little child that's like, oh, fuck, strong guy. What does this mean? And like,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean that particular roommate, I would hear his mom leave messages and talking to his mom. And his mom is just abusive, just saying all kinds, a total bully. I mean, a
mhm,
relentless bully. So we knew where it was coming from, but yet I still, I still had my own. I was still triggered for myself. So one of the things we hadn't touched on yet is I'm just curious, like, how have you navigated your path?
mm,
What challenges did you run into? I've definitely shared
totally.
a few of mine. So,
Yeah.
what are some of your challenges you run into with being a man? And was it similar things or different things? What sort of things? Yeah.
Yeah. My core wound for a while seemed to be that, I was given conditions around drugs, sexuality, work, demographics. And though I had the most supportive family, I internalized this is the mold of who I had to be loved. And for a while, that created a whole bunch of fear of there is no expression of anything else, of less work, of more expansive sexuality, of trying drugs, because if I do any of those things, then I actually have to hide them and I'm not safe in that. And it took me a while to realize that a lot of the surface level anxiety that I had when I was like in my late teens and early 20s was actually just a protector to not feel the fear underneath of, fuck, what if I'm not loved?
Mhm.
And that brought me to a long, fun, beautiful journey back to myself. It started earnestly with meditation, and just dealing with the anxiety component and dealing with the social anxiety. And then it went into a lot of deep nature based solitude, and learning again, like what beauty felt like,
Mhm.
learning again what flow and clarity and ease actually physically felt like in my body. Then for a while, it was living with indigenous cultures. I had a scholarship and seeing like, whoa, what are healthy templates for societies living beautifully and easefully? And then I think I got to a point where I was just ready to not just address the anxiety and not just to meditate on it, but to bring myself into every emotion that I was scared of by visualizing those situations and feeling the emotions that were already in my body, not creating it intensity, but allowing and embracing the intensity that was already there
Mhm.
and wailing it out, sobbing it out, yelling it out, dancing
Mhm.
it out, shadow boxing it out. And I still do that all the time of like, great, I feel something or I feel conflict. It's exciting because it means I get to embrace a new part of myself that isn't yet free.
Mhm. Mhm. Wow. So what were the ideas you were given though about what it took to be loved as a man? What do you believe? Like, what were their messages? What have you decoded? You've done a lot of work on yourself. Uh so I mean, overall, that's a wound a lot of people have, right? Like
Mhm,
fear of not being loved. I mean, where did it
mhm,
come from? How did it relate to how you get loved as being a man?
mhm. Yeah, there was the cultural sort of work aspect of things, especially I grew up in a Jewish culture where,
Mhm.
I was studying to be a doctor. I was a really good entrepreneur in biomedical engineering. And it was like, your gold stars are your love. How many gold stars you get directly related to how much love you've earned. And so there
Wow.
was a decoupling from intrinsically what I actually wanted to do and allowing, the unfolding of uniquely who I am and what's mine to give and my gifts from what culture wanted me to be. And for that, it was really important to get out of the normal reinforcing circumstances of culture. So going to travel with already having like an introspective lens and applying that to the world and just observing, took me away from shoulds and shouldn'ts. These are the questions you should ask, and these are the answers to the questions. These are the people you talk to, and these are how they think. It really took me out of groupthink really deeply and gave me my own sense for what's normal based on what's alive and beautiful for Scott. And I got to a point where people are like, man, I can't believe you're doing what you're doing. And I didn't realize even what I was doing was abnormal until
Mhm.
people would be like, wow, this is really radical. And I'm just like, yeah, I think healthy is normal and our normal is deeply unhealthy. And probably just speaking to the choir on that one.
Mhm.
Um, there was another piece too where when I grew up 20 years ago, we weren't as open as a culture around sexuality. We would say things like faggot and things that really weren't acceptable. Excuse me if that offends anyone at the time.
Mhm.
And so, as curious young kids who are, exploring and experiencing everything, I just blocked everything. I was like, oh, I'm a sensitive person. And I just took that as I internalized that really deeply of like, oh, I'm a sensitive person, but I can't be these whole things because I wouldn't be loved.
Mhm.
And when I came to just love all parts of my sensitivity, all parts of myself, of like, you get to be who you are, you just feel a radical acceptance and
Mhm.
also a cleanness to what you actually want. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that was my challenge in part two is the sensitivity, the sense of boundless love for life and everybody, and that unconditional love vibe that is in my heart. And yeah, I know, like, it's funny that I would do a little bit of bullying of kids here and there, nothing extreme, but a little, whatever. It was, it was bullying. And then at the same time, though, if I saw kids being bullied, I would also be a protector at the same time. So
Mhm.
let me step in, let me stand up for you. And it's funny when I did. People respect that, the bullies even respect that. They're
Mhm.
like, oh, okay, like, so, they respect that. So it's just, Yeah, it's interesting. Like, will somebody just show us a healthy model of being in your strength? I think is what it comes down to.
Hmm.
Show me a healthy model because I don't know another way. It's
Hmm.
kind of what I'm hearing in this. Like, show us a healthy model. So when I show
Totally.
them a healthy model, hey, this isn't good. You shouldn't be doing this. Stop.
Hmm. Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay, all right, sure, whatever. Like, but then
Yeah.
they back off. So yeah.
We've really we've lost contact with that. That's the sad objective truth is our elders used to be elders, used to be
Mhm.
people who had the wisdom to show templates because the fact that they got to that age was they had went through enough hardships authentically on their own to
Mhm.
nurture and teach and inspire future generations.
Mhm.
Where most part our elders are no longer, people who are, I don't want to overly generalize, but often our elders aren't the people who are growing the most wise and mature emotionally.
Mhm.
And so we have no choice but to be our own parents, to be our own elders, to be our own templates of what strong, healthy, loving, direct, conflict embracing masculinity looks like. So actually, our children do. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. Well, I'm grateful to have this conversation with you today, and I know my our time seems to be coming to a close here, but wow, just there's so much we could talk for a long, long time. Extra, really appreciated this one because you actually helped me to look at some pieces directly, and I'm glad we did that. And I'm grateful you're willing to be vulnerable. It's funny, even conscious guys have a hard time talking about their vulnerability sometimes on these interviews. It's like,
Mhm.
well, we've got to go there, I guess. Like that's what I get from most of them, to
Yeah.
be honest. Some joyfully jump right into it, but
Mhm.
more even some of them, the conscious guys are reluctant. It's like, is it safe? And
Yeah.
yeah, because I mean, we've had that experience. You open up and it's like, I got your weakness, right? Because again, that's that whole
Mhm. Mhm.
thing we do in our society of like, this is my way of getting on top, and all this sort of thing. Now I'm stronger than you, and
Mhm.
wow, it's wild, and yet there's cultures where none of this exists. That's what it just is so cool to me. Like
Mhm.
that's my hope for all of us is when we can embrace more of that way of being, where love is the norm. Like it's happened. It's happened in human history where
Mhm.
love is the norm, peace is the norm. I mean, it's
Mhm.
not that they didn't have struggles. Don't get me wrong. Like they didn't have the things we have today that were
Totally.
comfortable in that way necessarily, but I'm just saying, like the love was the norm, and
Mhm.
that's the direction that I want to keep pointing towards anyway. So
Yeah. I appreciate the work you're doing to not just, have that idea, but to actualize it in conversations with men and being vulnerable and finding what is a template for love is the norm for a healthy masculinity. And so thank
Mhm.
you for doing the work that you're doing.
Thanks, Scott. You as well. And yeah, I'm sure some people might want to be in contact with you. We really got some great stuff to share. So appreciate you so much.
Cool. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you for listening in to Just Two Conscious Guys Talking, where our mission is to impact millions of men ultimately to deepen their awakening by examining their consciousness of what's been unfolding for them with male stereotypes and programming that has allowed them to have opportunities to evolve during these times. It's an exciting time to bring more love to men and women around the world, and we are grateful for you tuning in today. Feel free to share this episode and keep tuning in, and also look in the show notes for a link to get notifications of future episodes. Until the next time, everyone, goodbye for now.